Hello everyone, and welcome to my rereading, my remake of my read aloud from 2021, Captain Underpants and the Revolting Revenge of the Radioactive Robo-Boxers. This is another one I decided to remake because when I initially recorded the old read aloud, I did not have the full color version of this book, so let's begin. Full color, Captain Underpants and the Revolting Revenge of the Radioactive Robo-Boxers, the 10th epic novel by Dav Pilkey with color by Jose Garibaldi and Wes Gioba.
Help! The world is in big trouble! Maybe the comic book on the next page will help to straighten things out! The top secret truth about Captain Underpants. Once upon a time, there was two cool kids named George and Harold. We the boss daddies!
Me too! They had a really mean principal named Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah! One day, they hypnotized him. You will obey us! Okay, they made him believe he was a superhero. You are now Captain Underpants. Okay.
It was funny at first. Ha 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 ha! Tra-la-la! But then Mr. Krupp jumped out the window. Wait! Mr. Krupp really thought he was Captain Underpants. He got in a lot of trouble. Come back, bub! No way! I'm a hero! One time a big monster attacked the school from book 3. Rawr! It tried to eat up Mr. Krupp. George found some superpower juice in a UFO. Glub glub. Drink up, bub! Then Mr. Krupp got superpowers. Pow! Now he can even fly and stuff. Tra-la-la! But how are they chasing him in the sky? The worst part is, whenever Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, snap! He turns into Captain Underpants. Yet they forgot to draw the ground here, so it looks like George and Harold are literally walking on air. And whenever Captain Underpants gets water on his head, he turns back into Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah! So anyways, in our last adventure, there was an evil guy named Tippy Tinkletrousers. That's me. He built a big robo-suit. Then he climbed inside. I'm going to destroy Captain Underpants. Oh yeah? They got in a big fight. Behold my ice ray. Miss me, zong, zap. Tippy accidentally froze his feet to the ground. Oh no, my feet are frozen. Ha ha! Clank, rats, you broke my robot. But Tippy's robot pants was also a time machine. I'm going to escape by going back in time. Oh no! Tippy's robot pants went back in time 5 years ago. But some bullies saw the robot pants and got us scared. Yeah! They got so scared they all went bonkers. Doi, doi, goo goo gaga, me go boom boom. Mr. Krupp got blamed for the whole thing. You're fired, Superintendent. I'm a victim of circumstance. Now the future has changed. Everything is different. Since Mr. Krupp got fired 5 years ago, why me? He never got hypnotized by George and Harold. Since Mr. Krupp didn't get hypnotized, boo-hoo. He never turned into Captain Underpants. Since Captain Underpants doesn't exist, who's that? He wasn't there to save the world. Who will save us? Beats me. Tippy realized his mistake, spelled like the meat kind of steak, when he came back to the present. Oh no, the world got destroyed, all because I scared those bullies. Tippy vowed to make things right. I will fix this mess, but then, uh-oh, stomp. Who will save us now? That is actually ketchup, by the way. Chapter 1, George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the giant zombie nerd on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the giant zombie nerd on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. In our last if you read our last adventure, you may recall the final terrifying scene where Tippy Tinkletrousers ended up cowering beneath the gigantic foot of zombie nerd Harold. You were probably horrified when the supersized shoe slammed down to the ground, leaving behind a squishy red stain. You may even have commented on the surprising inappropriateness of such a murderous and bloody scene appearing in a children's book. It's fun to feel offended, isn't it? Unfortunately, I'm sorry I have to tell you that there was no murder at the end of this last book. There wasn't even any blood. See? It was ketchup. What'd I tell ya? What happened at the end of our last story is something called misdirection. It's what happens when you are led to believe that something is true, but in reality it's not true at all. Misdirection happens a lot in real life, especially in politics, history, education, medicine, marketing, science, religion, and the Oprah Winfrey Network. Slow zombies at play. With all that misdirection out there, life can get a little confusing. But don't worry, this epic novel contains no misdirection whatsoever. This legendary tome will explain everything, from our recent narrative complexities to the vast mysteries of our universe. By the time you get to page 210, you'll know it all. You'll be a genius. You'll be smarter than the most brilliant scientist who ever walked the earth. So let's get started, shall we? If you've ever been to the zoo, you might have noticed that really big creatures move kind of slowly. Take elephants, for example. They don't move very fast even when they're in a hurry. Sure, they might cover a lot of ground, but that's only because they're so big. If you were to shrink an elephant down to the size of a house cat, you'd be shocked at how long it takes for them to get from one place to another. They're so darn slow that it wouldn't be long before somebody changed the story of the tortoise and the hare into the more appropriate the miniature elephant and the hare. It's the same thing with Runstrom zombie nerds. Sure, they're big and scary and stuff, but they move really slowly. So if a zombie nerd ever lifts his foot over you with the intent of stomping you into a puddle, don't worry. You actually have a real minutes before you're in any real danger. Tippy found this out the hard way. When zombie nerd Harold lifted his foot above Tippy's head, Tippy screamed in horror. Then he screamed again, and again, and again. Then he checked his watch and screamed some more. Finally, Tippy's voice got a little scratchy from all that screaming, so he got up and walked over to one of the few remaining stores on the planet to buy some cherry throat lozenges. While he was there, he purchased a new suit and bow tie, read part of a magazine, and got a foot massage. On his way out of the store, Tippy noticed an extra-large novelty ketchup pack that was on sale, so he bought it and dragged it back to the scene of the crime. Zombie nerd Harold's shoe was still coming down slowly as Tippy placed the extra-large novelty ketchup pack under it and walked away. Tippy climbed back into his robo-pants just as zombie nerd Harold's shoe hit the pavement and crushed the giant novelty ketchup pack. A bright red stain squished out from beneath the zombified shoe as Tippy's robo-pants disappeared in a crackling glow of light. You see, Tippy had mistakenly caused him trouble the last time he had gone back in time, so he had to go back again to undo the damage he had done. But before I can tell you that story, I have to give you this warning. Chapter 2. Let's get serious, folks. Did you ever notice how grown-ups hate it when kids are having fun? Seriously, when was the last time you were doing something fun and some adult came over and made you stop? If you're like most kids, you're probably reading this very book or watching this very video because some adult wanted you to quit playing video games or watching TV. If you don't believe me, try this experiment. Grab a few of your friends, go into the corner of a room and start goofing around. Make some noise, start laughing and cheering, and maybe shout a woohoo or two. It's been scientifically proven that 89.4% of all grown-ups will drop whatever they're doing and rush over to put a stop to whatever nonsense you're up to. You have to wonder, why are most grown-ups like this? Weren't they ever kids themselves? Didn't they enjoy laughing and cheering and goofing around when they were young? If so, when did they stop, and why? Now, I certainly can't speak for all adults, but I'm going to anyway. I think it's a lot easier for adults to stomp out someone else's fun than it is for them to reflect on their own lives and figure out where it all went so miserably wrong. It's just too depressing for grown-ups to ponder all the decades of compromises, failures, laziness, fear, and regrettable choices that slowly transform them from running, jumping, laughing, fun-loving kids into grumpy, complaining, calorie-counting, easily offended, peace and quiet demanding grouches. In other words, it's harder to look within yourself than it is to shout, "Hey, you kids, cut that out!" Keeping this in mind, you might not want to smile or laugh while reading this book or watching this video. And when you get to the flip or on the parts, I suggest you flip or watch with a bored, disinterested look on your face, and some adult will probably take this book away from you and make you read Sarah Plain and Tall instead. Don't say I didn't warn you. Chapter 3. Tippy returns again! Tippy Tinkle-Trousers was in big trouble. He had zapped himself back in time 5 years and accidentally frightened 4 bullies. This thoughtless mistake set in motion a series of events that ultimately got Mr. Krupp fired. And since there was no Mr. Krupp, there was no Captain Underpants. And since there was no Captain Underpants, there was nobody to save the world from the terrible devastation caused by the villains from our first 3 epic novels. Tippy decided there was only one thing to do. Go back in time and stop himself from scaring those bullies. But in order to do this, he would have to go back in time before the last time he had gone back in time. All I heard was time. So Tippy set his Tinkle Time Travelometer for 10 minutes before the last time he had arrived in the past and pressed the "Away we go" button. After several seconds of made-for-television style special effects, Tippy found himself transported to the awful night of the terrifying thunderstorm. Everything looked very familiar. He knew at any moment the 4 bullies would come running from the school and tear across the football field. Then they would come face to face with him. Well, a slightly younger version of him, and only he could stop it all from happening. Tippy hid behind the side of the school and waited as the wind howled ferociously. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of lightning struck a nearby power line. The electricity in the school went out and all the windows became dark. Tippy listened closely and heard the sounds of squealing and slapping and shuffling. It sounded as if a terrible struggle was taking place inside the school. Then, suddenly, the back door of the school crashed open and the 4 petrified bullies shoved their way outside. Quickly, they darted toward the football field. This was Tippy's big chance. He aimed his Freezy Beam 4000 at the running delinquents and zapped them all with a mini mountain of molecularly modified ice. The 4 bullies were frozen in place. Tippy scanned the boys with his life systems monitor and found them to be perfectly preserved. The carbonite and toboggan gas-infused ice had been programmed to remain solid for 15 minutes. Just long enough for Tippy to do his thing. Quickly, Tippy turned toward the football field where a ball of blue lightning was growing bigger and bigger. Suddenly, it exploded in a blinding flash. And there, where the ball of lightning had been, was a giant pair of robotic pants. "Boys, that was a close one," said a voice from inside the depths of the newly arrived RoboPants. "Captain Underpants is a lot stronger than I thought." The zipper of the newly arrived robotic trousers opened and a tiny man peeked out to marvel at the world of 5 years ago. But to his surprise, he saw an identical copy of himself staring straight at him and tapping his gigantic robotic foot impatiently. "Who are you?" asked the newly arrived Tippy. "I'm you," shouted future Tippy. "You're from the future." "What's going on?" asked Tippy. "I'm here to stop you from scaring those kids over there," said future Tippy, pointing at the frozen bullies. "Why?" said Tippy. "What's so important about those kids?" "I have no idea," said future Tippy. "All I know is I scared those kids when I came back here last time, and apparently it caused a chain reaction that resulted in the total destruction of the Earth, more or less." "I see," said Tippy. "So what do we do now?" Future Tippy looked at his watch. "Those kids are going to thaw out in 8 minutes and 11 seconds, he said. "We've got to be gone by then." So he reached into the cockpit of his RoboPants and grabbed one of his very first inventions, the Shrinky Pig 2000. Tippy aimed it at the younger version of himself and pressed the button. Blizzark! A powerful beam of energy blasted the newly arrived Tippy Tinkle trousers and his gigantic pair of RoboPants and shrunk them down to the size of a baseball. Big Tippy reached down and picked up the tiny version of himself. "What did you do that for?" shouted Tiny Tippy. "I can't very well have 2 of us running around," said Big Tippy. "I've got to keep an eye on you." Big Tippy tucked Tiny Tippy into his jacket pocket and checked his watch again. 4 minutes and 16 seconds, he muttered to himself. He looked over at the 4 bullies and cases of now cracking ice mound. Big Tippy turned to his Tinkle Time travelometer and programmed it for a date in the future. Time was running out. The ice around the bullies was disintegrating fast, so Tippy sneaked away to the center of town, pressed his away we go button, and disappeared into a ball of blue lightning. 2 seconds later, the ice mountain that encased and preserved the bullies disintegrated completely. Without skipping a beat, the 4 frightened friends continued their mad dash away from the school. As they ran across the football field toward their homes, something about Kipper and his friends changed forever. They would never again be the same despicable bullies they once were. Chapter 4, Fixing the Future. Big Tippy had set his Tinkle Time travelometer for a sunny afternoon in October, 4 years in the future. He arrived, as usual, in a giant ball of blue lightning that grew bigger and bigger until it exploded in a blinding flash. "What's going on out there?" cried Tiny Tippy. "I can't see a thing!" "Shh!" shushed Big Tippy, as he shoved Tiny Tippy down into the deep, darkened depths of his jacket pocket. Big Tippy listened carefully. He heard the voice of a child muttering, "This can't be good." Tippy unzipped the zipper of his RoboPants and peeked out. To his delight, the world looked like it usually did. No destruction, no giant zombie nerds, no moon rocks. Everything seemed pretty normal. "Hey, it's Professor Poopy Pants," shouted a small boy whom Tippy recognized immediately. Suddenly, 2 cops standing nearby started to laugh, which angered Tippy. "Stop laughing!" shouted Tippy. "My name is no longer Professor Poopy Pants. I changed it to Tippy Tinkle Trousers." The 2 cops laughed even harder. And I've got a special surprise for anybody who thinks my new name is funny, said the furious professor. Tippy pressed the button on his Freezy Beam 4000, causing it to rise from the depths of his robo-pants. He set the freeze ray for 20 minutes and zapped the cops, transforming them into frozen statues. My Freezy Beam 4000 would take care of anybody who stands in my way, said Tippy. And now, he said with a wicked smile, it's time for my revenge. Oh no! Screamed George. Here we go again! Screamed Harold. Tippy chased George and Harold and their two pets, Sulu and Crackers, through town, zapping his Freezy Beam 4000 at them and laughing maniacally. The chase lasted all afternoon and into the night. The four friends hid behind buildings, inside trash bins, under bridges, and even down in the sewer. But it didn't matter where they sought refuge, because Tippy Tinkle-Trousers always found them. By the morning of the next day, our heroes had found a hiding place behind some bushes near the park. What are we going to do? Whispered George. There's nowhere else to hide. I don't know, whispered Harold. George and Harold looked at their two pets shivering with them in the morning mist. We are not going to make it, whispered George, but there's no reason that Sulu and Cracker should have to suffer. Harold's eyes began to water. You're right, he whispered. George and Harold patted their two friends sadly as they devised a plan to return to the dinosaur age. We could use a purple potty to take Crackers back home where he found him, said George. Yeah, said Harold, and Sulu could stay there with him. They'll both be safe there. As soon as it was clear, the four friends sneaked away from the bushes and headed for Jerome Horowitz Elementary School, carefully avoiding major streets and intersections. It was almost noon by the time George and Harold and their two pets reached the school. Cautiously, they sneaked through the front door and dashed up the stairs to the library. Hey, Bob, shouted Mr. Krupp angrily. Where have you kids been? George and Harold looked down and saw Mr. Krupp carrying a large cardboard box. Well, Mr. Krupp shouted, get down here and explain yourselves. George and Harold looked at their two pets and continued running up the stairs. Mr. Krupp was furious. His day hadn't started out very well. For some strange reason, all the red curtains in his office had been disappearing, and he wasn't happy about it. So Mr. Krupp had driven angrily to the store, bought a replacement box of curtains, started a big fight with the cashier, got a flat tire on the way home, and now his truant students were bringing animals into the school, ignoring his commands, and running up the stairs. You kids get back here, shouted Mr. Krupp as he chased after the four frightened friends. George and Harold and Crackers and Sue raced to the top of the stairs, dashed into the library, and locked the door behind them. There they beheld their old troublesome nemesis, the purple potty. It was a homemade time machine that had a few quirks, to say the least, and our heroes approached it cautiously. Do you still remember how to use this thing? Asked Harold. Of course, said George. We just used it yesterday morning. All I have to do is set the controller for 65 million years ago, then pull down on the chain. Easy squeezy mac and cheesy. Suddenly, Mr. Krupp reached the library door and struggled with the locked door, and the boys heard a shuffling sound followed by the jingling of keys. Let's boogie, cried George. The four friends climbed into the purple potty, and George closed the door. At that very moment, Mr. Krupp came crashing through the library door with his box of red curtains. He ran to the purple potty and banged on the door. I know you're in there, he screamed. You can't hide from me forever. Hurry, cried Harold as George fiddled with the controller. We've got to get out of here. I'm working as fast as I can, cried George. Suddenly, a gigantic dark shadow filled the library. Mr. Krupp turned to see a huge robotic pair of trousers at the window. The zipper unzipped and Tippy Tinkle-Trousers peeked through the cavernous opening. I've got you now, he shouted. Ha, ha, ha. Tippy reached for the button on his Freezy Beam 4000 and Mr. Krupp cowered in terror. At that very moment, George finished setting the controller for 65 million years ago. Then he pulled down on the chain. All at once, there was a brilliant flash of green light, and the purple potty, along with Mr. Krupp and his cardboard box, disappeared into a whirlwind of electrified ozone. Chapter 5, Tiny Tippy's Tremendous Task. Rats! Screamed Tippy as he watched a purple potty disappear. Those kids have a time machine, and I don't know where's they went. What's going on? Cried Tiny Tippy from the depths of Big Tippy's pocket. I can't see a thing. Those kids took off in a time machine, Big Tippy barked at the miniature version of himself, and they took Captain Underpants with them. Where did they go? Asked Tiny Tippy. How should I know? Big Tippy yelled. Hey, I've got an idea, said Tiny Tippy. Why don't I go back in time and find out? Good idea, me, said Big Tippy. He reached down and placed Tiny Tippy in the library. You go back in time 10 minutes and listen to everything they say. Then, when I show up, tell me where they went. You got it, said Tiny Tippy. He set his tinkle time travelometer for 10 minutes ago, and in a brew crackling instant, he was gone. Tiny Tippy arrived in the same spot he had left, only it was now 10 minutes earlier. He heard some people running up the stairs, so he decided to hide behind a trash can. Suddenly, George, Harold, and the two pets dashed into their room and locked the door behind them. Tiny Tippy watched as the boys tiptoed toward the tall, time-traveling toilet. That's a lot of T words. Do you still remember how to use this thing? Asked Harold. Of course, said George. We just used it yesterday morning. All I have to do is set the controller for 65 million years ago, then pull down on the chain. Easy squeezy mac and cheesy. Aha, muttered Tiny Tippy. They're going back in time to the Mesozoic era. Tiny Tippy watched as the four friends climbed into the time machine and closed the door. He saw Mr. Krupp crash through the library door and bang on the lavender lavatory. Then he saw himself, the big version of himself, that is, appear at the window. I've got you now, shouted Big Tippy. Ha, ha, ha! Suddenly, there was a brilliant flash of green light, and the purple potty, along with Mr. Krupp and his cardboard box, disappeared into a whirlwind of electrified ozone. Rats! Screamed Tippy as he watched the purple potty disappear. Those kids have a time machine, and I don't know where they went. I do, said Tiny Tippy as they stepped out from behind the garbage can. Who are you? Asked Big Tippy. I'm Tiny Tippy, said Tiny Tippy. That's impossible, said Big Tippy. Tiny Tippy is right here. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the miniature version of himself who had been complaining because he couldn't see a thing. I'm 10 minutes older than that guy, said Tiny Tippy. You sent me back in time so I could find out where those kids went to. Oh, I get it, said Big Tippy. Good idea, me. So where'd they go? They went backward in time to 65 million years ago, said Tiny Tippy. Aha, said Big Tippy and slightly younger Tiny Tippy to themselves simultaneously. They're going back in time to the Mesozoic era. Big Tippy picked up Tiny Tippy and shoved him into his pocket next to slightly younger Tiny Tippy. Let's all go back to the dinosaur age, shall we? If we time it right, we can get there just before that purple potty arrives. Chapter 6, 65 million years ago. The primitive midday sky lit up with several blinding flashes as a purple potty suddenly appeared in the top of an ancient tree. George and Harold had successfully brought Crackers back to where they had found him, but when they opened the door of the purple potty, they discovered they also brought a stowaway. What the heck is going on here? Cried Mr. Krupp as he hung from a branch high up in the tree top. Oh no! Cried George. Mr. Krupp must have been standing too close to the purple potty when we zapped backward in time. He got zapped back with us. Harold reached out his hand to grab hold of Mr. Krupp. How could things get any worse? He asked. Suddenly, the tree started to shake. Boom, boom, boom went the tree. George and Harold looked down and saw Tippy's gigantic robo-pants kicking the side of the tree. What's he doing here? Cried Harold. I don't know, said George, but I think we're about to fall. The horrible kicking continued and the tree shook wildly. Finally, the purple potty slid sideways and toppled over. We're doomed! Screamed Harold as they all fell. The purple potty cracked and split apart as it tumbled down the side of the tree. Mr. Krupp fell too, smacking against every branch on the way down. Suddenly, the purple potty hit the ground with a terrible crash and broke apart into 1,000 pieces. Mr. Krupp hit the ground too, but was surprised to find out that he wasn't hurt a bit. Big Tippy kicked through the wreckage of the purple potty, but could not find any trace of George or Harold or their pets. Where did they go? He asked. Look up there, cried the two Tiny Tippys, who were peeking out of Big Tippy's pocket. Crackers had grabbed George and Harold and Sue at the last second. Good boy, Crackers, cried George. You saved us. Not for long, screamed Big Tippy as he peered peevishly from a porthole on top of his robo-pants. George and Harold looked down at Mr. Krupp, who was still trying to figure out how he had fallen 60 feet and not gotten hurt. The two boys snapped their fingers. Suddenly, a welcome smile spread across Mr. Krupp's face. Immediately, he pulled off his shoes and socks, then he unclipped his tie and ripped off his shirt. He grabbed a red curtain from the cardboard box beside him and tied it around his neck as he wiggled out of his pants. Captain Underpants was back, and Tippy Tinkle Travis and his two tiny twins were in for the fight of their lives. Chapter 7. Two tiny traders. George and Harold ran through the thick jungle foliage with Crackers and Sulu flying above them. Captain Underpants decided to tag along too, just for fun. Big Tippy jumped onto the back of a nearby Tyrannosaurus Rex and chased after them. You can't run forever, shouted Big Tippy. When I catch you guys, I'm gonna tear you apart. Can we help? Asked the two tiny Tippys who were tucked away in Big Tippy's jacket pocket. No, yelled Big Tippy sternly. You two keep quiet while I take care of business. This is a job for a man, or two little twerps like you. As the chase continued, the two tiny Tippys grumbled to themselves. Boy, I'm getting tired of that giant jerk bossing us around, said Tiny Tippy. Me too, said slightly younger Tiny Tippy. He thinks he's such a big shot just because he's huge. I sure wish I still had my Goosey Girl 4000, said Tiny Tippy. Then I could make myself big again. I was just thinking the same thing, said slightly younger Tiny Tippy. But unfortunately, we stored the Goosey Girl 4000 in the top half of our robosuit, and Captain Underpants destroyed it back in Chapter 8 of our last epic novel. Hey, cried Tiny Tippy, why don't we go forward in time to Chapter 8 of our last epic novel? We could grab that Goosey Girl 4000 and make ourselves gigantic. I like the way you think, me, said slightly younger Tiny Tippy. So, while Big Tippy chased everybody through the treacherous jungles of the Cretaceous period, the two tiny Tippys set their Tinkle Time travelometers for the night of the big battle from Chapter 8 of our last epic novel. Big Tippy was so engrossed in his pursuit of our heroes, he didn't even notice the teensy-weensy blue sparks of flashing light emanating from his pocket, as his two devious doppelgangers disappeared into a whiff of primeval troposphere. Chapter 8. Mission Improbable. Instantly, the two tiny Tippys zapped forward in time, only to find themselves knee-deep in something creamy, coconutty, and marshmallowy. Honey, said a mother who was setting her dinner table, two little pairs of pants are walking around in our ambrosia salad. Oh, really? Said the son. And I'm the one seeing a therapist. Tiny Tippy and slightly younger Tiny Tippy crawled out of the serving bowl and shook off the pineapple chunks and mandarin orange slices that stuck to their legs. Then they jumped to the floor and slid through the mail slot in the front door. Outside, they could hear the crashing sounds of the terrifying battle between Captain Underpants and Big Tippy. The two tiny Tippys ran toward the noises until they arrived at the school's football field. Captain Underpants had just started pulling on Tippy's robo-arms. One by one, the rivets in the robosuit's thick steel belt began to pop. Captain Underpants yanked and tugged and pulled, and finally the robosuit tore in half with a terrible clank. Tiny Tippy and slightly younger Tiny Tippy ran over to the place where Captain Underpants had dropped the upper portion of the robosuit. Quickly, they searched through the twists of metal until they found out what they were looking for. The Goosey Girl 4000. Outside, they could hear the crackling sounds of Big Tippy zapping himself backward in time. A blinding flash lit up the nighttime sky as the two Tippys dragged the Goosey Girl 4000 from the wreckage and carried away with them through the parking lot. Soon they came to a darkened street behind some old warehouses. Okay, said Tiny Tippy. You zap me, and I'll zap you. Hey, said slightly younger Tiny Tippy, how come you get to go first? Because I'm slightly older than you, said Tiny Tippy, and slightly more mature. All right, said slightly younger Tiny Tippy, who could not argue with the fact that Tiny Tippy was indeed 10 minutes more mature than himself. Let's just do this thing and get it over with. He aimed the Goosey Girl 4000 at Tiny Tippy and jumped up on the button. And before you could even say "Glazert," a beam of energy zapped Tiny Tippy, causing him to grow 30 feet tall. Zap me again, said Tiny Tippy. All right, said slightly younger Tiny Tippy, but then you'll zap me, right? Sure, said Tiny Tippy, I promise. Glazert went another bright beam of energy. This time, Tiny Tippy grew to be 60 feet tall. Ha, 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 he laughed. Behold, I have been reborn, a super mega Tippy. My turn, cried slightly younger Tiny Tippy. Super Mecha Tippy reached down and grabbed the Goosey Girl 4000. He tucked it into a cup holder on his electrical panel and waved goodbye to slightly younger Tiny Tippy. Hey, cried slightly younger Tiny Tippy, what about me? Sorry, said Super Mega Tippy, but this is a job for a man, not a little twerp like you. Chapter 9. Meanwhile, 7 pages ago, 65 million years earlier, Big Tippy had chased our heroes to the jagged edge of a cliff overlooking a lake. Crackers grabbed George and Harold by their shirt collars, and they all sailed safely over the edge of the cliff to join Captain Underpants in the clouds. Big Tippy's Tyrannosaurus Rex screeched to a halt at the cliff's edge and roared ferociously at the 5 floating friends. We won! Captain Underpants laughed at Tippy. Now it's our turn to chase you. This isn't a game, yelled Big Tippy. This is serious. He leaped off the neck of the T-Rex and grabbed Captain Underpants with his patented robotic Extendiflex mechanic gripper. Together they fell 1,000 feet into the lake below. When they emerged from the depths of the lake, something had changed. Tippy was still just as mean and ornery as ever, but Captain Underpants looked different. What the heck is going on here? Yelled the angry-looking hero. Oh no! Cried George. Captain Underpants got water on his head. He changed back into Mr. Krupp. Quick, Crackers, called Harold. Fly us down there as fast as you can. Crackers glided down toward the tempestuous struggle below, and the boys snapped their fingers with all their might. But it did no good. Mr. Krupp's head was still soaking wet, so he could not change back into Captain Underpants. Well, look what I just figured out, cried Pig Tippy. Captain Underpants turns back into a crabby old elementary school principal whenever he gets wet. You leave him alone, yelled George, still snapping his fingers in vain. Yeah, cried Harold, it's not a fair fight anymore. Wow, laughed Big Tippy incredulously. He's got to be the world's easiest superhero to defeat. I could have destroyed him with a squirt gun. Suddenly, a blinding flash lit up the world around them. Then came the footsteps. Terrible, deafening, tumultuous footsteps that shook the earth with each thundering stomp. Finally, a massive shadow spread across the lake. Big Tippy looked up. It was Super Mega Tippy. Hey! Shouted Big Tippy. He quickly checked his jacket pocket and found it to be empty. Where'd you come from? How'd you get so big? Where's the other one? None of that is important now, said Super Mega Tippy. What's important now is who's in charge. Hey, you'll never believe this, said Big Tippy, ignoring his diabolical double. I just figured out that if you get Captain Underpants wet, he loses his superpowers. His weakness is water, said Super Mega Tippy. Wow. Really? I know, said Big Tippy. I couldn't believe it myself. Hey, I'm gonna destroy him real quick. Then we can get out of here and go rule the world and stuff. You're not going to destroy him, said Super Mega Tippy. I am. Now hold on, Bob, said Big Tippy. I got him, so I'm gonna destroy him. Oh yeah, said Super Mega Tippy, with a growl that made the surface of the lake tremble. But I'm bigger than you, so I'm gonna decide who destroys who. He took a giant step toward Big Tippy and reached down with an Extendiflex mechanic gripper. Not so fast, cried Big Tippy. He pressed a button on his control panel, causing the back of his RoboPants to lower. Suddenly, a gigantic metal arm emerged from the depths of Tippy's giant RoboBear, revealing a RoboRear. Why'd I read rear as bear? Revealing a 40-ton thermonuclear bomb. You'll take one step closer and I'll blow us all to smithereens, said Big Tippy. You're forgetting something, yelled Super Mega Tippy. I have a bomb too, and it's a lot bigger than yours. Super Mega Tippy took a step closer as Big Tippy pressed the button. Suddenly, a light on the side of the bomb began to flash red. A computerized voice emanating from the bomb's arming system began the countdown. This bomb will detonate in 60 seconds, said the voice. You'll press the button, screamed Super Mega Tippy incredulously. I can't believe you actually pressed the button. I don't care, cried Big Tippy. I've been working on my revenge for years. I'm not going to let you rob me of this moment. I don't care if it kills me, too. Well, you should probably care about that if it kills you. This bomb will detonate in 45 seconds, said the bomb. We can't turn these bombs off, you know, said Super Mega Tippy. Once the countdown starts, it's over. I told you, I don't care, said Big Tippy. I just want to be the one who finally destroys Captain Underpants. Super Mega Tippy reached down with an uncoiling Extendiflex mechanic gripper and cut Mr. Krupp free. Hey, screamed Big Tippy, what are you doing? He's mine, said Super Mega Tippy as he drew back his foot. But what about me, said Big Tippy. What about my bomb? Your bomb, your problem, said Super Mega Tippy as he kicked Big Tippy with all his might. Chapter 10, What Really Killed the Dinosaurs. No! Screamed Big Tippy as he sailed into the clouds at an incredible speed. The bomb will detonate in 30 seconds, said the bomb. Big Tippy flew across North America, soaring faster and faster through the stratosphere. This bomb will detonate in 15 seconds, said the bomb. Big Tippy began to lose altitude as he sailed toward the Gulf of Mexico. This bomb will detonate in 5 seconds, said the bomb. 4, 3, 2, 1... Finally, Big Tippy landed just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula with a violently colossal splashdown, as seen below. Plip! Kablooski! The massive explosion that followed blew a chunk in the air 15 miles deep and more than 60 miles wide. terrible earthquake shook the entire planet as a gigantic tsunami sent a towering wall of seawater rolling across the continents. "What's happening?" cried George. "It's that dumb nuclear bomb," shouted Super Mega Tippy. "It just triggered the start of the Cenozoic era. I'm gonna become extinct if I don't get out of here." Quickly, Super Mega Tippy set his Tinkle Time travelometer for 64,793,216 years into the future and pressed the "Away we go" button. Suddenly, gigantic bolts of lightning began shooting out of Super Mega Tippy's robopants as a ball of blue light enveloped him. "Quick, Crackers!" cried Harold as a thick volcanic ash began blocking out the sun. "Fly into the blue light! It's our only chance to escape!" Crackers pointed his long reptilian neck toward the crackling orb, and the four friends sailed downward into the blinding blue lightning. Which is totally easy to say 10 times fast with a mouthful of crackers. Blinding blue lightning, blinding blue lightning, blinding blue lightning, blinding blue lightning, blah, 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 blah. Chapter 11, 206,784 years ago. A flash of white light filled the mid-afternoon haze of the Pleistocene epoch. The crystal blue lake that had once been there was now gone. In its place were vast savanna plains stretching out to thick forested hillsides and rocky caves. All was quiet, except for the sounds of insects and birds and a faint rhythmic drumming far off in the forest. "Where are we?" asked George. "I think the better question would be, when are we?" said Harold. Super Mega Tippy was surprised to see George and Harold and Crackers and Sulu. Well, he said. "It looks like we have 4 stowaways." But what Super Mega Tippy did not realize is that he had a 5th stowaway as well. It was slightly younger Tiny Tippy, who at that very moment was carefully crawling down a button on Super Mega Tippy's shirt. "That stupid Mega Tippy thinks he can lie to me and get away with it," said slightly younger Tiny Tippy as he jumped onto the control panel. "But I'd teach him a lesson he'll never forget." Slightly younger Tiny Tippy pried up into an aluminum vent and slipped effortlessly into the wiry innards of the control panel. First, he reversed the polarity of the emulsifying salsiflange inhibitor. Then, he switched the blue and the green wires on the reverse symbobulating tractamic fractionalizer. Finally, he snipped all the wires to the Freezy Beam 4000's off button. "Ha, ha, ha," laughed slightly younger Tiny Tippy. "The next time that big jerk uses his Freezy Beam 4000, he's going to get a big surprise." Meanwhile, the drama outside was getting serious. Super Mega Tippy swatted at our heroes as they soared bravely through the Ionian sky. Crackers skillfully swooped and dived and loop-de-looped as the Extendoflex Mechanic Ripper whizzed after him. But Super Mega Tippy quickly became impatient and unleashed 2 more Extendoflex Mechanic Rippers. Poor Crackers could not outmaneuver them all, and the 4 friends were soon captured. "I've got you now!" screamed Super Mega Tippy. "Hey, look!" said George, pointing at the ground behind Super Mega Tippy. "There's a bunch of cave people down there watching us." "I'm not falling for that trick," said Super Mega Tippy. "As soon as I turn around, you guys are going to try to escape." "No, seriously!" cried Harold. "We're not lying! Look behind you!" Super Mega Tippy glanced quickly and noticed that the boys were indeed telling the truth. Standing behind them at the edge of the forest were about a dozen very surprised-looking cave people staring up in dumbfounded bewilderment. "You boys shouldn't be surprised to see cave people," said Super Mega Tippy as he studied the strange prehistoric people. "We're in the middle of the Pleistocene epoch. This is around the times that the first human families started to appear on Earth. I'll bet you dumb kids didn't know that, did you?" Super Mega Tippy tried to turn to smile haughtily at George and Harold, but of course they were gone. Sue had been through 3 of the Extendoflex Mechanic Rippers, and 4 friends had fluttered away. "No!" screamed Super Mega Tippy as he stomped his gigantic feet in frustration. The startled cave people screamed and ran in terror back to their homes in the deep forest. Super Mega Tippy grabbed some strong vines and tied Mr. Krupp to a boulder underneath the waterfall. "There," he sneered. "This should keep you moist and powerless until I get back." Then he stormed into the forest searching for George and Harold and their pets. Chapter 12, Calling All Cave People. "How are we ever going to get out of this mess?" asked Harold. "I don't know," said George, "but we're going to need Tippy Tinkle Trousers if we ever want to get back home." "Are you kidding?" said Harold. "But we can't trust that guy. He can't even trust himself." "I know," said George, "but Tippy has a time machine and we don't, so we're going to have to defeat him." "But we need an army to defeat that guy," said Harold. "So let's go get an army," said George.
The four friends glided above the grassy plains as they followed the sounds of beating drums. Soon they arrived at the forest. The drumming was getting louder. Cracker swooped down and landed behind some bushes near the caves. Just beyond them was a cave people village. George and Harold and Crackers and Sulu peeked over the thick bushes as they watched the cave people go about their daily routines. They seemed peaceful, so George decided to speak up. "Hello," said George. "We come in peace. We are friends." The cave people looked confused and startled. They did not seem to understand. "Maybe they don't speak English," said Harold. "Hello, hey," said George, who only spoke one other language. "Ewe umke and way east pay. Ewe our way end spray." That didn't work either. The cave people grunted and sniffed at George and Harold and their pets, but they said nothing. Suddenly, off in the distance, the sounds of gigantic footsteps came thundering through the deep forest. Tippy was coming, and he was getting closer and closer with each terrifying stomp. "I know you're in that village," Tippy screamed, "but you can't hide from me." Tippy crashed through the trees and stomped into the village, kicking over huts and smushing everything in sight. The terrified cave people grabbed their children and ran for the safety of the caves behind their village. George and Harold and Crackers and Sue ran to the caves also and hid with the cave people in the darkness as the destruction outside continued. After a while, some cave teenagers started a campfire. The flickering light illuminated the massive walls of the caves as the cave people whimpered and huddled together in horror. "Wow," said George, "some army they turn out to be." "It's not their fault," said Harold. They never seen giant robopants before. They're just scared." "If only we could communicate with them," said George. "There's got to be some way to reach them." Harold looked up at the giant blank walls of the cave. "How about pictures?" he asked. "Hey, good idea," said George. Harold walked over to the campfire and grabbed a charred smoking stick from the burning cinders. Then he went to the one side of the giant cave and started to create the world's first cave drawing. At first, the cave people were astonished. They had never seen anybody draw before. They laughed and pointed and jumped up and down every time Harold drew something new. But when Harold drew Tippy and his robopants, the cave people came frightened. They grunted nervously and lowered their heads in fear and submission. "Wow," said Harold. "How are we ever going to change our minds about Tippy?" "I know," said George. "Let's make a wordless comic. They'll understand that." "Good idea," said Harold. "Let's do it." So George and Harold found a ladder and began creating the world's very first comic. The cave people watched with excitement as George and Harold's tale unfolded. Soon their opinions about Tippy and his robopants began to evolve. Chapter 13, the world's oldest comic, starring Ook and Gluck. There's Lily the dinosaur. That dinosaur's name is Lily, by the way, if you've never read Ook and Gluck before. So Lily is just enjoying herself and going about her day, when she suddenly bumps into a rock. But wait, that isn't a rock. It's one of the feet of Tippy Tinkle Trousers and his robopants. So Lily decides to hide in a house, but Tippy crushes the house anyway. But Lily didn't get crushed at all, as she's running down a hole when she sees a branch on the cliff. Tippy spots Lily on the branch, and Tippy breaks the branch, so Lily is falling to her doom. Lily falls onto an oncoming waterfall, and Ook and Gluck hear Lily's calls. So Ook and Gluck swing from a vine and rescue Lily from her soon-to-be demise. But guess who's coming back? So Ook, Gluck, and Lily hide in a forest in order to get away from Tippy. And they decide to create a vine trap in order to trip Tippy. So Tippy does trip on the vine and lands on the ground, and then gets hit by a log. But Tippy was not happy, so he decides to chase Ook, Gluck, and Lily again. So Ook, Gluck, and Lily decide to run onto the back of a woolly mammoth, and Tippy just kicks the mammoth's butt. And understandably, the mammoth is not happy about this, so Tippy gets what he deserves. Tippy falls to the ground again, and a pineapple lands on his head. Ook, Gluck, and Lily laugh at it, but Tippy chases them again into the thick jungle. Ook, Gluck, and Lily see a bee, so Gluck gets an idea. Ook and Gluck made a fake lily made out of these materials shown in the comic right here. And of course, there's that pineapple from earlier. Tippy spots the fake lily, decides to grab for it, but then the pineapple aims for the beehive above Tippy's head. A swarm of bees go outside the beehive and decide to run after Tippy, where he then falls again, as you can see. And one of the rocks from the fake lily falls on his head. And that's the end of the comic right there.